Hey, fifth graders, Mr. Greenfield back again. The last couple of times that we've done some videos here, we've been talking about mean, median, mode, and range. And I've mentioned a couple of times on the mean that we're finding a leveling out of numbers. And if you remember from your foldable that to find the mean, you're going to add all of your numbers up in your set of data and then divide by how many pieces of data you have. So a lot of us understand how the mean works, but some of us were confused and emailed me and asked, what do you mean by the leveling out of numbers? So I was going to do a video to show some examples of what mean actually means or what average actually means. I'm going to move this over to the side. So let's say, for example, we're going to talk about Mrs. Hagemeister, Mrs. Blake, Mrs. Kelzer, and Mr. Greenfield. And we're going to talk about the amount of I don't know, TV shows we watched last week. So let's say that, for example, Mrs. Hagemeister, she watched 5 different TV shows last week. So I'm going to use some coins here as my counters. So she did 5 shows. And Mrs. Blake, she watched 3 shows last week. Mrs. Kelzer, she watched 6 shows last week. So we'll put 6 counters there. And Mr. Greenfield, he watched 2 shows last week. So if we look at our set of data, we have 5, 3, 6, and 2. Now we know if we were going to find the mean, we would add all these up and divide by 4 people to find the mean. But I also want to let you know this whole leveling out of numbers, how that works. Basically, what you're doing is you're redistributing the numbers to find an even level mark. That is your average or your mean. So if I take a counter from the highest part on our bar graph, if we look at it that way as a bar graph, and redistribute it over to Mr. Greenfield, and I redistribute one of the higher ones from Mrs. Hagemeister's over to Mrs. Blake, and one from Mrs. Kelzer over to Mr. Greenfield, you can see now we're all level. We all have the same amount, 4 different counters. Now we know that Mrs. Kelzer watched more TV than Mr. Greenfield, but if we wanted to average or find the mean of all 4 of these teachers watching TV shows for the entire week, on average, or finding the mean, if we added all these up, we would have gotten 16 divided by 4 would equal 4. So the average number of TV shows that these 4 teachers watched were 4 shows. Now we know anytime you're finding the average, you're going to have some that have more and some that have less, just like Mrs. Hagemeister had more than Mrs. Blake. But when we find the average or the leveling out of numbers, we're trying to evenly distribute everything. So if we look at it as another example, let's take my quarters here. Let's use a larger data set. So we're going to have 6 people. So we have 6 students here. We have Ben, Titus, Grace, Austin, Gabby, and Emma. And let's say we were going to, I don't know, how many YouTube videos you watched in a week. And Ben told me that he watched 5 YouTube videos this week. So I'm going to put 5 counters there. And Titus told me he watched 4. And Grace told me she watched 4. Austin told me that he watched 2. And Gabby told me she watched 3 videos on YouTube. And Emma told me she didn't have time to watch any. So she's at 0. Now, if we look at all of these coins, we've got a grand total of 18 quarters here. So if I redistribute these or level them out if I take the tallest stack from Ben and I move it over to Emma, and I take another taller one from Ben and move it to Emma, and I take one from Titus and move it to Emma, and I take one from Grace and move it to Austin, you can see we level out to an average of 3 different YouTube videos per person. Or if we remember from finding the mean or the average, we add it all up and our total was 18 coins. And we divide by the number of pieces of data. We had 6 people. Even though Emma didn't watch any YouTube videos, she's still part of the data set. So we still have to include her. So there's 6 people. So if I divide by 6, my mean or average is going to be 3, which is what we got here when we were using our quarters for manipulative. So that's why we call it a leveling of numbers. So finding an average or a mean, really you're leveling out your data set. You're redistributing the numbers so that everyone has the same amount. I hope that clarified things a little bit, and I'll see you next time.